So, folks, hi, good night, good evening. So, there are many different kinds of programs that run here at 92nd Street Y, and this is a live recording of a podcast. And so, as such, I'm going to actually reintroduce Mark at this moment, just because it's just uniform with the second season of the podcast. So, hi, I'm Rabbi David Ingber. Welcome to this special live taping of Detours and Destinations from the 92nd Street Y. Conversations about big ideas, inspirations, and yearnings that animate all of us, and the always winding paths that they set us upon. Thank you for exploring that tonight with us. The inspiration for Detours and Destinations came from a blessing I was once given, where a friend said to me, "May all of your detours be destinations." So I am pleased to introduce tonight's guest, the true artist of heart and soul, the award-winning poet and author, visionary teacher and seeker, and my friend, Mark Nepo. With over 1 million copies sold, Mark Nepo has moved and inspired readers and seekers all over the world with his #1 New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening, which is how I first was exposed to your work. Beloved as a poet, teacher, and storyteller, Mark has been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time. His work is widely accessible and used by many, and his books have been translated into more than 20 languages. A best-selling author, he has published 25 books and recorded 16 audio projects. Mark was part of Oprah Winfrey's The Life You Want tour in 2014 and has appeared several times with Oprah on her Super Soul Sunday program on OWN TV. He has also been interviewed by Robin Roberts on Good Morning America. The Exquisite Risk was listed by Spirituality and Practice as one of the best spiritual books of 2005, calling it one of the best books we've ever read on what it takes to live an authentic life. Mark devotes his writing and teaching to the journey of inner transformation and the life of relationship. Mark, welcome to the 92nd Street Y.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. Absolutely.
So we're going to hear, to pivot towards the book that is kind of your latest expression, latest emergence from your bountiful heart, your abundant heart. But just in keeping with the theme of the podcast, I want to just begin with asking you to speak to the question that is implied in that blessing that I received from my friend, which is, how do you conceive of, what are detours? Are there anything but detours? Is it all a detour? Like, when you think of those constructs, do they work for you? Do they not work?
Yeah.
How do you breathe into that?
So let me back up and speak about that a little, and then share personal my journey a little bit. So I think that dreams, ambitions, goals, they're all guesses. We're all guessing, and then when we finally have a goal or a dream, we hook onto it and we go, oh my God, and then we kind of write it in stone, and then if we detour or don't get what we aim to, now we're a failure. And, William Blake said that straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to genius. And crooked is the road to genius, which more than a special capacity is our deepest awareness, So I do think that, we are often taught to move from here to there, from the bottom of a mountain to the top. From being unknown to known, all these different destinations. But great love and great suffering have always returned us that heaven is right here in every moment open. So it doesn't mean, well, then we just don't do anything.
Right.
We don't. No, because I have discovered in my life that dreams and goals and ambitions are the kindling for the fire of aliveness. And just like a fire doesn't care what kind of wood you put on it, our soul doesn't really care what the kind of care you throw onto it, as long as it's care. So to go to my life, and as you know, I'm 74. When I met someone my age younger, I thought they were very old. It doesn't seem so old now.
Not at all, from my vantage point.
But, in my 30s, as some of you know from my books, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. And at that point, I was a driven young artist. I was hoping, maybe if I worked hard enough, I might write 1 or 2 great poems that might add to literature. And, life was pulled out from under me. And I found myself in a hospital, and forget writing great poems. I needed to discover true poems to help me live.
Is that the first real detour?
The first real detour, yes. And yes, so then I think all the traditions speak about the real journey is from in to out, not from here to there. From in to out. And one of the greatest kind of teachers of this, just think of simple flowers. Just think for a minute how they grow. So whether it's a wildflower or a planted seed, they start underground, buried, growing toward a force they have no knowledge of and have never seen, light. And then they break ground. Now they grow in two directions, above and below, until they're strong enough and they start to sprout a flower. And so when a flower blossoms, it is literally revealing its inner beauty by turning inside out. And it does this by going nowhere. What a teacher. And so whatever we put our energy into, it's wonderful if we achieve some of our goals or our dreams, but ultimately it's revealing that inner beauty,
So what I love so much about your writing, and when I was exposed to it, I want to give credit to a congregant in the synagogue that I founded in 2008 here in New York, a congregant named Jade Netanya Ullman, whose regards I gave you earlier. She kind of gave me the Book of Awakening, and I started reading it, and each page, each reflection, much like every single work of yours that I've read since then, and I've read all of them, I feel like each one is like that flower. Like I could spend hours, and I've written many sermons. People in the community know that were my favorite go-to to reflect on a passage, almost like I would, a Buddhist teacher who would pose a koan of sorts or an image that you have. So working with this image that you just gave us of this turning inside out and growing in two directions towards that which is unseen and that which is known, but also rooted in that which is known. Where does suffering, and let's say the first detour in your life and then future subsequent detours, suffering that ennobles but breaks us, suffering that stops us short, that forces us to find the way that we might live.
Yeah.
That poetry went from a vision for you and a dream to something that gave you life force. Where in that image, beautiful image, is suffering? Is it the soil? Is it the harsh conditions? Is it the negretto of the seed becoming blackened and dying?
Yeah.
What is
it's
that?
all of it.
It's all of that.
It's all of it and more. And so I think, one of the things, as I mentioned, great love and great suffering are the teachers that we cannot avoid. And I think that human beings grow in two major ways, and that one is willfully shedding, and the other is by being broken open. And if you won't willfully shed, don't worry, you'll be broken open. And often it's a combination of both. And so we don't. It's not to deify suffering, but it's like we all live with gravity. This is like spiritual geography. There is suffering, which is different than when we harm each other. Suffering is like nature is eroded, and suffering is the agent that erodes us of all that is unnecessary if we won't willfully put it down. And of course, it's not to kind of rationalize and say, well, every time we suffer, it's a wonderful thing because we'll get something out of it. No, sometimes you will break open and I'll just break. But tomorrow we'll take turns. And when you break open, then you can help me when I'm just broken, and I can do the same. So I think that we're all called not to avoid our suffering and not to seek it, but to meet it and ask for help. And I think in my life I've discovered, I think that life has been made just difficult enough that we need each other to ensure the journey of love.
So in that very powerful reflection on suffering and love and suffering and that which either breaks us open or breaks us. I'm reminded of a teaching of a Hasidic master who quoted the Talmud that said that there was a covenant made between God and humanity in suffering and also in salt. Quoting the salt in the book of Leviticus is used on the sacrificial offerings in the temple. They used salt. There had to have a salt was placed onto the meat that was being sacrificed. And the Talmud said, just as salt brings out the sweetness in meat, right, suffering can bring out the sweetness in human beings. And this Hasidic rabbi quoted that and said, but let's take the analogy a little bit further. Too much salt can ruin the meat, and too much suffering can ruin a person. And so what is it in us, sitting here at the 92nd Street Y, a place where, as you told me earlier tonight, when you think of the Y, often, Elie Wiesel comes to mind, someone whose suffering was so immense, and so the enormity of his suffering and what he witnessed and what he went through. But somehow, I don't know if he would even be comfortable with me saying this, but he alchemized it to some degree and produced from it great compassion and great wisdom. What is it? What's the ingredient that separates someone for whom suffering breaks them? Is there an ingredient? And someone who is ennobled or makes of it some gold alchemically? Is there something?
Yeah, so let me speak to that. Of course, I don't have any answers, but let me speak to, and let me back up and say, I think that each of us in our want to discover a spiritual practice. As you know, I'm Jewish. I have a deep tie to my Jewish heritage, but because of my almost dying from cancer, I'm a student of all paths. And so whatever it is, whether you're in a particular tradition or you have found your way in the things that touch you from many traditions, I think that we all, it's always a practice of return to the corridor of aliveness. So being human, we fall off this way, that way. Oh, I gave myself away today. Oh, I was too walled off today. Too much salt, not enough salt. So it's always this being a spirit in a body in time on earth is always this practice of return. So with that in mind, I think that the key to how we integrate our suffering is always a practice of how do we take in what's before us and face what is ours to face. And then often we need help doing that so that what is unnecessary can be flaked off or sloughed off, and what is necessary can be nurtured. So we say that, but it's not, it's messy. It's messy. I just, as you know, a year ago last Saturday, I had major back surgery. I'm so blessed. A year ago, I couldn't put on my socks. My wife Susan had to help me here, and here I am, And during that time, just to kind of put a nitty-gritty example here, so I had chronic pain for the first time. And my heart goes out to people who don't find a way out of it. I was blessed to find a way out of it through the surgery and recovery, though it took almost a year. But there were times when I was in pain and afraid, and I couldn't get out of it. And so I couldn't run from my pain or fear, but I had to begin to ask myself, okay, what is the nearest thing to me that's not afraid and not in pain? And it was the floor under me, and it was the ceiling above me, and it was the firmament above the ceiling, and it was the ground we're talking about under the house that was holding me up where I was afraid and in pain. And that makes a difference because that right sizes our pain. So let me share, this is wonderful that you mentioned the salt. This is a story from the Hindu tradition, an anonymous Hindu teaching story that has salt in it. So there's a master and apprentice always. And in this case, the master, he really finds the apprentice annoying because all he does is complain. So he says, bring a handful of salt and put it in a cup of water and bring it to me quietly. So he comes. He says, drink. He drinks. He spits it out. And the master says, what's the matter? He goes, it's bitter. So he says, I want you to get the same exact amount of salt, put it in your hands, and follow me quietly. So he leads him to a lake. He says, put the salt in the lake. He does. He says, drink. He kneels down, scoops the water. It dribbles down. He says, so? He says, oh, it's fresh. And the master says, stop being a glass, become a lake. Stop being a glass, become a lake. And what this anonymous teaching story holds for me is we cannot eliminate fear and pain, but we can right-size it. And one of the ways to right-size it is to enlarge our sense of things. That, to go back to, everything when we're in pain and fear is not afraid or in pain. And so if we don't, not only will the pain be more acute, but we'll get bitter. So the question for each of us is, and for me always, is what experiences, practices, and relationships help you enlarge your sense of things? So that when pain and fear say hello, you can go to your toolbox, your spiritual toolbox. And that might be calling you up, saying, help, I can't get out of it today.
Wow, I love everything. So first, to just say something about the word return, as you said, is so, as you know, this is so of the moment, because in the Jewish tradition, we're 1 week away from Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year, whatever it means exactly. It doesn't mean exactly New Year, but call it that. But it's a period of reflection and introspection whose chief characteristic is the process known as returning, tshuva. It's mistranslated as repentance, but it's not accurate. The word is cognate with the word to return a lost object. And so the returning, right, this notion of returning is returning to the breath, returning to the ground of being, returning almost like I would say, I used to live on the 5th floor walk-up here in New York, and for those who can commiserate, it would take me some time before I could catch my breath when I would walk through the door. My wife would be there, and I'd be heaving. And the real question became not whether or not I would lose my breath, but how quickly I would re-find it, right? So like the distance between being lost and found, because we'll all, as you said, lose ourselves and get lost in various things, and how quickly we re-find and we relocate ourselves. And that's so amazing that you went there. And then the second image that you gave is also profoundly beautiful, that even in the context of, especially with fear, but then in detours, like if we enlarge the sense of how big the journey is, maybe, or as you said, the goal is a dream and it's kindling for the soul, which is so beautiful, that the detour is diminished in its intensity by the ground in which it's seen against. And so I want to enlarge like the Mark Nepo, space around you, and like I want to meet little Mark. Like I want to meet you, like 5 years old. Who's Mark Nepo? Is Mark Nepo 5 years old and regaling his fellow 5-year-olds or with like profound mysteries and riddles, like just where's the? I'd love to meet little Mark.
Yeah, well, thank you. So there's a couple of things. So
yeah.
one immediately, which I love, is you all know Annie Hall, Woody Allen's Annie Hall, and there's a scene where he's the little boy and with his big glasses, and his parents bring him to the rabbi, and he says he's depressed, and the rabbi says, "What's the matter?" And he goes, "The universe is expanding." And she hits him in the back of the head and says, "What's it your business?" That's kind of how I grew up.
Oh, no.
But also, I think I was very normal and unsure and running around and, with kids and getting hurt and what did this mean? But when I look back, I think my native language was always metaphor, even though I never knew what that meant. But from an early age, and I grew up on Long Island, and so there wasn't a lot of nature. But wherever I was, when I would see things, not in words, it would say to me, like wind through the trees. As a little boy, it would say, okay, what am I like? What am I like? And then, so I think I've always had that blessing or that gift. And so I've always then, before I even knew what it was to be a poet, I've always tried to work, not necessarily record it, but work out what I was learning through words, work out what I was seeing through words. And then someone said, oh, that's a poem. Oh, that's a metaphor. Okay. I guess that's what I do.
It is, absolutely. and was there a certain point where you realized, after reflection and people saying, oh, you really know, you're touching us with your reflections, as you put your experience, your raw experiences refracted through the prism of words. Was there a moment like, oh, that became a thing, like I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a...
Well, I had two, what led me into writing was the first woman I fell in love with in high school, went to college ahead of me, fell in love with someone else. I was devastated. And I began writing. And I realized very quickly, 18, that I wasn't talking to myself. I had begun a conversation with the universe, with life. And so there's another thing where suffering opened the door. Opened the door. Now this is our challenge, not to get stuck in the doorway, which is understandable. That's why we need each other, to help us through the doorway. And so there's another story about doorways in a second. But when I knew that I was a poet, I was a freshman at Cortland State in upstate New York. And Cortland is on a hill, the university, and if you fall off in any direction, you're in a bar on the circles, the thing. So I was in spring going over the hill, and then about a mile away was another hill, and a wind came behind my ear. I swear to God, this is just a mystical moment. And I stopped, and then in 10 seconds, I saw the wind in the trees on the far hill. And I understood the reach. And I knew I was a poet, even though I hadn't written anything. And then I went home and and I was the first in my family to go to college. So I went home and told my father, who taught at Brooklyn Tech High School in Brooklyn, and my mother, very, very intelligent people who grew up in the Depression. And my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. My father wanted me to be an architect. And I came home not having written anything and said, I'm a poet.
Yeah.
And we had that classic argument. And my father, screaming, said, how are you going to make a living? And I don't know where it came from me, but I uttered, I'm going to live a making. And it took me years to understand what that meant. So the story about doorways, this goes back to Dante's Divine Comedy, which we're all asked to read way too young. And but as you know, Dante is guided by a spirit guide, Virgil, the Roman poet Virgil, and he is led through hell, purgatory, to paradise. Well, smack in the middle, they come upon a wall of fire. And Virgil hovers in front of Dante's face and says, it is the fire that will burn but not consume. You must go through it. And Dante goes, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. This has been nice. Whew. Virgil, even closer, repeats, it is the fire that will burn but not consume. I will meet you on the other side. And he vanishes. So Dante summons his courage. He plows through the wall of fire. He's a little nicked up, but he's okay. Virgil is never to be seen again. Did he deceive Dante? Did he trick him? Well, of course, I don't know. There's no answer, but I hold it. Once that wall of fire is the fire of transformation. It doesn't always appear as a fire. It could be the loss of an identity, a dream, a loved one. Could be the ground shifting under us in how we see the world. But once we go through the wall of fire, we become our own guide. Doesn't mean we don't learn from others. Doesn't mean we're alone. But he didn't need Virgil anymore once he went through the wall of transformation.
It reminds me, of course, of, like, as you know, the seminal Jewish myth is the story of the Exodus from Egypt, and the entire Exodus narrative, which of course we in the West are so familiar with, you know, Charlton Heston, the whole nine. But the mystical moment is also in plain view, because the Israelites, in order to become free, have to be willing to walk through a door using the blood of the god of Egypt as their passport. So they're told by God, or Moses is told by God, to tell the people to take a lamb, which of course at that point was the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. Talk about civil disobedience. It's the object that is of terror for the Israelite slaves, because it's the god, one of the gods of Egypt. And they're told to bring it into their homes and then to slaughter it and use its blood as a kind of birthing canal. They're supposed to put blood above them and on all sides of the doorpost. And then that would be the signal that they were ready to be free. And that becomes, of course, immortalized in Jewish homes and buildings, where we put a mezuzah, this little kind of amulet that is not straight in this direction, not straight horizontally or vertically, but on a diagonal, pointing towards the liminal, literally the liminal. And each Israelite had to walk through that birthing, as it were, canal to become a free human. And so freedom always involves a huge risk, and it always involves either, you know, baptism by fire or by blood in some sense. Something is, you know, at risk. I'm so curious, though, even like, you keep bringing these amazing, I'm so banal with this, but do you remember the first thing you wrote? Like your first poem, or the first time you thought, oh, besides, I'm going to live a making, which is awesome too. I mean,
well, just let me say, I have my grandmother's mezuzah on the threshold to my study.
Oh,
yeah. So
that would be such a good thing to go to ask people. In you know, what's your mezuzah? Even, you know, Jews, non-Jews, whatever your tradition is. Yeah. Who's helping you at the doorpost? Your grandma's helping you. Yeah. Moving in and out of space. Yeah. I love that.
So I don't remember the exact first poem I wrote, but I know the first poem that I felt was a complete poem. So I have a dear friend who helped me survive cancer, Paul. He lives in Florida. But he was, when we were younger, he was a master rock climber. And I was curious. I'm not a rock climber, you believe me. So, but I was curious, like, and I felt it would be safe. Can you, like, show me this? So he took me to, some of you might know the Shawanana, I'm not even saying it right, Shawannagunks, which is up near Catskill. It was a whole range where people who do rock climbing, there's actually guides for things. So he took me there one day, and we started, he was without a rope, and I was in a rope, and we did a very basic thing. You know, he was like walking upstairs. But for me, so he gave me two instructions. One was, if you feel like you're falling, push out, which is counterintuitive because you're on a rope, and then you'll be secure, standing on the face of the stone. And the other was, make sure you accurately decide what you can do. Because once you're up there, there's no elevator down. So if you don't think you can do this, honor your limitations. It's a practice in seeing things as they are. So of course, I get up there. I started to slip. We're about 20 feet up. I just hugged the rock and slid right down, scraped everything up. And then he made sure I was all right, and above me, he said, okay, now you gotta keep going. And so the lesson was, when we fall, we have to go right back over where we fell. And so writing about that, my first, I think, really complete poem was called A Guide to Rock Climbing. Yeah.
Mm. Well, what did you make of having to push away from the I want to read the poem.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
It's great. And so that becomes, I mean, so much of your writing is taken from very concrete, lived experience that then becomes a doorway, speaking of a doorway, for you into something profoundly a teaching, right? Whatever it is, water and fauna and flora and reefs, and, you know, so many of your images, Reduced to Joy, is full of these remarkable places, and I mean, it's just who you are. Is it? What's it like being Mark Nepo, living in the world where everything is a metaphor for something? Do you ever think that it's just a conversation between me and the cashier?
Well,
Or is it become you're talking to Ganesh?
yeah. Well, it's always both.
Both.
Because, one of the things Einstein said, you may have, I'm sure, familiar, he said you can study a problem for years and discover it one day while eating an apple, the solution. And it's because, I think that the details of this life are the seams of the universe. We discover the universal through the particular. We have this gift as human beings, we can conceptualize. But through the heart, through feeling the detail, we feel. And so an example, would be, my father, when my father's been gone about 10 or 12 years now, and I was able, as I was in this moment, some of you will recognize, where I was suddenly alone in a hospital room, noise everywhere, things going on, and I was feeding him applesauce. And he had had a stroke, not a severe stroke, but a mild stroke. And so there I was, and all of a sudden, all of life was in me putting that spoon in his mouth. And I was tearing, and it was bitter and wonderful, and all of a sudden, oddest thing, I was in a moment of wonder. And there I was, making sure it didn't hit his teeth, and he's, And then, and this is the key to me, that because I gave my all to that moment, being completely who I am and holding nothing back, I slipped into the moment of everyone who ever fed a dying parent. Right. And I wasn't alone. And mystically, that has opened me to a different definition of resilience. Resilience is, of course, the ability to endure, to withstand, to overcome. But the deeper spiritual sense of resilience is by being authentic, it also works with love. If I care for you completely, in the instant I, bring you slippers, I trip into the moment of everyone who ever loved another. And that is one of the rewards for being real.
So a couple of directions I want to go. I want to come to the fifth season, but it's hard for me not to take this opportunity with you here to ask you a couple of questions, and then ask you to I want to ask one question. I want to ask you to speak into a story that is animating me at this moment before the holidays, and get your take on it. It'll come back to the question of agency and individual agency and collective support. But first, I want to ask you. I just recently there was an article about I think Brene Brown was in the New York Times talking about not wanting to be someone's guru, and then there was another article about Elizabeth Gilbert and her recent book, and was a very dark book, and it was a huge departure from her Eat, Pray, Love persona. So, in your public life, not just as known as a poet, but like in your own inner role, like how do you work with the projected image? You've written so much, and people read your books and think, wow, this man is a fountain of wisdom and great advice, and he must have his shit together all the time. And you're like, and do you have to struggle with that, or are your reflections so authentic because they have dark and light in them already, and so much of it is you work with the stuff of your life, both dark and light, that you avoid that, or how do you work with that as a teacher and as a public spiritual?
Yeah, thank you,
master.
So I trip, I fall down. I don't remember whatever, I can not remember all the things that I've learned and have to learn it all over again. And isn't that wonderful? What else would we do? So, I trip taking the garbage to the curb and I'm having a bad day, and my wife Susan will say, well, I know a good book you could read. And I go, well, thanks. That helps a lot right now. Because I'm not in a place where I can even read my own work.
Right.
So I would say that for me, and it's not through any wisdom on my part, but almost dying in my 30s burned a lot of stuff off me. Not through any wisdom again. But, and the image for me, as I've reflected over the years, is like if you're standing on a cliff and you lean over to see the view, and then I leaned further and further, and I saw more and more, and then I fell off. And I saw maybe more than I was supposed to. But instead of dying, I was somehow put back on the cliff. And so, not that I don't struggle with ego and identity or feeling insecure, but at a basic level around my heart and soul, that adrenaline of falling off the cliff of life and being put back burned a lot of stuff off me. So I feel, quite honestly, that I'm grateful for what all of the attention has given me, to be here with you now. And it gives me so many opportunities that I wouldn't have had, but it doesn't have anything to do with the work. The work continues. And so this goes to a deeper thing in any field, which is archetypal. We struggle when we're not known. We go, does it matter? Am I insignificant? Does anybody hear me? So that's like if you're walking and there's a strong wind ahead of you, you need to put your feet on the ground and lean forward. If you're blessed to have the wind at your back, it's the same walk, you just lean in a different direction.
I love that. When I say God, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think for me, that speaks and to the sense and the feel and the befriending of everything larger than us. And every tradition has a different name for it. And so I believe that, and I love the Hindu notion of namaste. Some people say namaste, but I use the Brooklyn version. So
nice. I like that.
Namaste. So
you throw it down.
Right. But which means I honor the portion of universal spirit that resides in you. We can call that soul, we can call that Atman, we can call that 1,000 names, And so I believe if you believe in anything larger than yourself, you're a mystic. And I've come through my years anyway, I don't really care what we call. As soon as we try to name it, we go to our theological corners, right?
Right. Then we're in our teams. We divide.
Right. Then we have teams and
Olympics, the God Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah. But even an atheist, believes in something larger than themselves. They call it nothing. I call it everything. We can still talk.
Mm-hmm. What are your practices?
My practices? Well, I think my practice is to try to live an integrated life moment to moment. So, I try to, and this is my practice of return. I believe in being wholehearted, but some days I wake up half-hearted. So how do I get back to the corridor of aliveness? And so the things that are simple and some days hard is I try to hold nothing back. I try to give my full heart's attention to the nearest piece of life before me until it becomes my teacher. It could be a fly on the wall, beyond my agenda. Because, going back to dreams, it really matters to give our all to our dreams. But we all know they don't often come true. But in giving our all, sometimes we come true, and that's more important.
the corridor of aliveness is directing me to the 5th season, and as an like giving some time to this remarkable work, I was taken by a piece that you wrote in here that really touched on this story that I've been holding before the high holidays, and I'm trying to find it. It's about love and emergencies. I'd like to find it. This has happened before. The problem with your books is that I actually wind up putting a sticky on every single page. It's like, there's nothing not highlighted usually. So that's, so I'll tell you a story from the Talmud as I leaf through this to find where is the love and emergencies. But I want to read a little piece from there. There's a story in the Talmud about a rabbi who's addicted to sex. And the Talmud says, believe it or not, that there was not one prostitute that he had not visited in his life until he heard of a remarkable prostitute, and he set out over 7 rivers with a bag full of dinars to go and have his final conquest. And in the midst of the act, apparently the Talmud records, this is talk about messy and dark, the Talmud records that she passed gas. And she said out loud, just as this gas will not return to its place, it won't return. So this rabbi, Elazar ben Dordia, you will not leave the world having repaired it and repairing the damage that you have wrought. And it hit him like a ton of bricks. And the Talmud doesn't describe what he went through internally, but he immediately, the very next moment, he's running around begging first the mountains and the hills to pray for him. And they say, we can't, we're busy praying for ourselves. Then he goes to the oceans and the rivers, and same thing, we're praying for ourselves. The sun and the moon can't help you, the constellations can't help you. Until finally the Talmud says, he sits down on the ground between 2 mountains, puts his head between his knees, and begins to wail until he dies with an exhale, and a heavenly voice comes out and says, Elazar ben Dordia has been given his portion in the world to come. And the phrase that he uses when he realizes that he can't get help from anyone else is, he says, it would appear, she'en hadavar talui elabi. It would seem that the matter depends on me and me alone. And so I was reading your Love and Emergency, and you write this: while we need others to awaken us to our capabilities, it is our responsibility to own and care for what is awakened in us. Over the course of our lives, we experience a mounting call to this inner responsibility. In the swirl of being loved, we can become obsessed with the one who has seen something in us that we didn't see. We think they have the switch to our light. And so we can let them out of our sight. And so we can't let them out of our sight. In truth, we have the switch. There's no place like home. It's very Wizard of Oz imagery, right? Our own light, and the greatest form of respect you can give to someone who loves you is to keep what they have loved in you open, alive, and growing. Otherwise, we become enmeshed and dependent on our loved ones to bring us alive. So, first of all, what are your thoughts on that story? Because I can't, it's in my mind. I've thought about it so much about, this frantic search for someone to save him, do the work for me. Feels very addiction, very like recovery. He needs to come to that place of surrender, right? Unless he has to admit that he can't do it alone, but he also can't let others do it for him. He has to first realize that. And so here in your piece, we have the responsibility to have that inner responsibility once something has been awakened in us. What do you think about that? And also, where do others come in? Because you also keep speaking about the need.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question that we can enter, not answer. So let's back up in that story and other stories. what drove that rabbi to be a sex addict in the first place. And so, no one can give us worth but our own direct connection to the authority of being that is in the mystery of life, whether you call that God or whatever you call it. And of course, we have this struggle between that inner work and our relational work. So we have these two very important spiritual needs. The one is for our direct experience of life. And I do think that that is something, it sounds so simple, but all the traditions offer us practices how to restore our direct connection with life, which is very important in our world today, because I think so much of what's happening is that so many of us have lost our direct connection with life. And therefore, we're drifting in, is this true? Is this not? Is this a fact? There are facts. If I put my hand in water, I don't need you to tell me it's wet. I know what heartache is. I know what joy is. Now, we can talk about what those mean, but we have our direct experience of life. And often the purpose of solitude is to restore that direct connection. And we also have a need to belong. Because if I'm only left with just my experience, oh boy, okay? But we are curious beings, because I can do all this work to know my worth through the worth and authority of being, and then I tell you, and you go, I don't know what you're talking about. I go, never mind, don't go away. Right. I'm ready to give it away in a second to belong. And we're at cross purpose, which is very human. So a great teacher in this are whales and dolphins. They're, we take it for granted, they're mammoth creatures, but they're air-breathing creatures. As much as they live in the deep, they've got to surface to breathe or they will die. They can't stay out of water without being immersed in it or they will die. This is a great teacher. So it's not about whether we're introverts or extroverts. This is the balance, the rhythm between solitude and community, between direct experience of spirit and belonging. So the question is for each of us, what is the healthy balance for you? Are you too much in the world? Are you too much in the deep? So I think that, we live in this world, this modern world, where we think spaciousness is emptiness. So then everybody says, fill it. We're in a filler-up society. Fill it up. Fill it up with sex, with this, with that, with everything. And all that does is clog up the inlets to spirit. So, it's this amazing thing that we have to, again, we don't need to seek out, but both joy and suffering clear us out. Clear us out so we can restore our direct connection. Because if we have that direct connection to life, then we have reverence for life. And if we have reverence for life, we can't do harm. And so when I see things like, January 6th and the insurrection, like many of us, I saw it live on TV, we were watching. And what struck me more than anything is in the midst of this horrible violence, people were taking selfies. And that alerted me how disconnected, as if no one knew whether it was real or a video game. And so how do we restore our direct connection to life so we can recover our reverence for life and do no harm?
And the book, so the 5th season, taken from Chinese, right, the Chinese philosophical tradition that there's, the 5th season is what you're calling, what my teacher, my Rebbe, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, a blessed memory, would call like your December years, or your winter years, kind of like the season of what Eric Erickson might have called generativity, right? So is this book, your latest project, the latest offering, is it something that you could not have written until this moment, or there are things in here that only now, now you get it?
Yes. So, but I don't think it's, while it focuses on the second half of life, it's not like other things. Just like when I went through my cancer journey, aging, illness, the great experiences of life bring in greater relief. The normal choice points we all experience all the time, and so, even though I'm learning these things in my 70s, we're all aging, whether it's from 20 to 40 or 40 to 60 or 60 to 80. And so these raise up choice points, and it's the fifth season is this Chinese, I took it from, Chinese lore, where it's considered this time of year when the light is extra kind of gold in late August, early September. And early Chinese philosophers quickly said, well, that's that time in life where things become bare, essential, integrated. We have a sense, looking back, of which we couldn't, because things take time, thankfully, to go, oh, look at that. We live forward and we map backward. And so they call this time of insight, where we said earlier, where I shared about the wall of transformation, which can happen at any time. But this they call the heavenly pivot, this pivot into putting down what's unnecessary, and this integrative period. So really, when we talk about the subtitle as creativity in the second half of life, it's not that, we're all going to create great art now that we have time. No, our life is the work of art. Our life is the work of art. And wherever we can put our care to live wholeheartedly and authentically, we allow God, the universe, the forces of the world, or whatever name you want to give it, to actually shape us.
So we're just going to take another 5 minutes to close, and then we'll have a Q&A, which is great. It won't be a part of the podcast, but we'll close the podcast portion. But I'm really buoyed by your interpretation of that story, but also just the reminder of the oscillation between solitude or agency, aloneness, whatever that might be, and also communitarian or belonging, that piece. And I'm also just wondering, like, if you look out into where we are in the world right now, between what's happening here, you mentioned January 6th, but obviously there's plenty happening right now on the national scene. And, just a couple of weeks, last week, the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk and the ongoing crisis in Israel and with Gaza, the war there, and Ukraine. I mean, no shortage of things that are now happening that are extremely painful. And I mean, some people are saying things like, this moment is, they've never experienced a moment quite like this one. And so where are you when you look out in the world right now, and what you think we need, and what role do you think your practices and perspective has on helping us get to go forward?
Yeah, thank you. So, first off, to say, if I had hair, I'd pull it out. Okay. But so there's a couple of things. To me, there is no excuse for the cruelty and for the dismissing of humanity. And so the question is, how long till it turns? Because throughout history is like waves in the ocean. There are times when we are more together than alone, and times when we push each other away. And I could give you dozens of examples. And this doesn't minimize the suffering or the cruelty that's at large in our world today. But this is the difference between incarnation and progress. Progress is when we outwardly leave the world better than we found it. That's a good thing. But incarnation is that no matter what age you live in, no one is exempt from going through this life with all of the turmoil and peace and suffering and joy and love and distrust and faith and doubt. It's our turn. And so every generation has had its version of what we're facing. And so, again, that doesn't minimize what we're going through, but we are challenged. So in doing research for my book, More Together Than Alone, which was a look at history and moments we've been done well together, cross-culturally. And so in what we call the Dark Ages, which were really just in Europe, it was 350 years or so, we're so self-centered, we say it was the whole. No, actually in Asia and in the Middle East, it was quite an enlightened time. But in Europe, 90% of the population was illiterate. That means 10% of the population kept literacy alive for 350 years. So despite all of our technology and our gifts, and again, there is no they, we are they. If we are blessed to be awake now, it is incumbent on us to keep the literacy of the heart alive and be the last good gesture standing. To be the last good gesture standing. How do we do that? That's part of why we're here having a conversation.
Yeah, I love that phrase. And so it's clear that when I met you personally in Chautauqua, I think it was Chautauqua, summer of 2022, maybe, was that it? That, I'd already read so many, all of your works and incorporated them into my rabbinate. And students and congregants were exposed in my community, was, here in New York. But it was clear that I had met a soul brother and from another mother, and it was really clear that I could talk to you for a long time. And so it's kind of funny that I looked at my watch and I was like, oh, it's been an hour already, really? But I just want to thank you, Mark, for the light that you put into the world. I want to thank you for the model that you have been, and the ways in which your vulnerability and the ways that you invite people into your beautiful, messy, real human journey give others kind of both a way to identify, but also to be led by the wisdom that you extract from it, and just the way that you live in a making. Like, just the way that you do it is just profoundly touching to me and to others. The book, The Fifth Season, will be available for those who are here. It'll be available outside at the stand, and also for you to sign it. And it's clear to me also, and I think that probably clear to everybody here and anybody who will listen to this podcast, that that you have no intention of slowing down your creativity as you enter into the fifth season, and that your output will continue to be prolific, and we bless you with that, brother. And so I want to thank you for being here tonight, and I want to say that for all of us here at 92nd Street Y and for the Detours and Destinations team, it was really a privilege to listen to you.
Oh, thank you,
brother.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna shift gears into the room, and if you have some questions, we're not gonna pass the microphone around, but if you could stand up or be really audible, that would be awesome, so that we could invite Mark into your question and into your thoughts. Okay, in the back.
I gotta come so I can hear you. Go ahead. So the question was about transitions, and so a book of mine a few books ago, Falling Down and Getting Up, is really all about different transitions. But let me just offer this one thing about, the the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, and he said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, not the kind of anxiety when you go to the dentist, but anxieties, the disequilibrium between life changes, and what that brings to mind is, again, another lesson from nature, is how little birds, how fledglings learn to fly. They're not taught. You know what happens? One day they're being fed, right? And then the mother goes, bloop. And so they fall out of the nest, and initially, they're like, oh my God, oh. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. And so, and we can't, while it is our inner work, we often can't do it alone. Yeah, thank you for that.
So I just want to add a little coda to the transition. So one of the earliest understandings of what it meant to be a Jew was not the word Jew, which is a kind of a descriptor but given to us by the Romans, called us Judeans from Judah. But the biblical name for Jews were boundary crossers, Ivrim. To be someone who knew the art of transitioning, right? Born at the liminal space between one room and another, Hebrews or Ivrim were those who knew what it was to move from one place to another and to transcend or live into the dizzying anxiety of freedom, right? The dizzying anxiety of freedom is to navigate that transition, but also to recognize that that's what we are. We're transitioning all the time. That's what it is to be human in a way. We're transitioning. And I love that you brought us to falling. It's kind of like, right? Like the dizzying, the kind of dizzying nature of our freedom is partially because we're afraid to fall. And what that story you brought was freedom will bring with it moments where your freedom will bring you to fall flat on your, on your face. But
yeah, thank you for that. I didn't know that about boundary crossers. I love that. Oh my goodness.
So it's great. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Well, I think, and thank you so much. I think this speaks to something with children all over, and it's a question that I've come to ask not just young people, but anyone, is what's it like to be you? What's it like to be you? Because that tends to invite a person's story that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have a judgment. And I actually learned that from a student of mine who was a therapist, and her daughter's best friend committed suicide, and she had a good relationship with her daughter, the student of mine, but she just couldn't reach her, and she asked her that, and that opened her up. What is it like to be you right now? And so anything that can reconnect, as we were discussing, the direct experience of life, because it's so hard. One of the things that's happening, and I think, which I would like to talk about as screen mentality, is that we're so used to now this screen mentality where we flip from thing to thing and we mistake observing for experiencing. It's not. So now that screen mentality isn't just when we're looking at screens, we're carrying it with us in the street. So I can go when I come out of the grocery store and I see some poor woman fall and drop her groceries, I go, oh, that's terrible, click. And I get in the car. No, she's 6 feet from me. That's real. So I don't have any answers, but anything that can affirm the reality that we're in, which comes from the heart, not the head, if that's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And then, yes. Oh, no, you just write this.
Well, first of all, just thank you for being here and everything that you bring to us. I first became aware of you when I studied at the Omega Institute, and I got assigned a copy of the Book of Awakening, which is still on my dining room table. But now we use the audio version, and it is marvelous.
Oh, thank you.
I began going to the Omega Institute a year after I received a cancer diagnosis of an extremely rare form of vascular cancer that was localized in my liver. And at MSK, there was no type of chemotherapy or treatment for it. They said this is just a watch and wait situation. And I'm like, well, wait for what? Literally, wait for what? The top cancer people in the world are saying, watch and wait. So at that time, I happened to have been sober for 12 years and already in a really deep practice of meditation and prayer. And so when your book came along, it fed me greatly. And I began receiving downloads. And one of those things is, as you were talking about returning, what I downloaded 6-7 years ago was when I go out and I return, the download I received was, who am I now? Now that I've returned, I'm different. I'm not the same Charles that I was a couple hours ago. I'm different now. And so the who am I now, when we're transitioning, when I'm returning, and 21 months ago, I received a liver transplant just a few blocks away from here. And receiving this divine inheritance from a 34-year-old young man from Richmond, Virginia, it was really, really hard. Physically incredibly painful. But I was able to go through that experience. I had so many people that were saying, Charles, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. It's so, the sorrow that was getting dumped on me, I'm doing an automatic reframe in my mind saying, this is happening for me. Thank you, but this is happening for me, right? So I just want to, more than anything, just thank you. It's not so much a question, but I'm able to do all of these reframings for myself and be here now because of the wisdom that you continue to share with all of us, that I'm able to do so who am I now? And this is not happening to me, this is happening for me. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad you're well. And I think, Charles, you share a beautiful, profound example of how facing what you needed to face has yielded such wisdom. That question, who am I now, that's a wonderful question for your students. Who am I now? Who am I? It's for all of us. Yeah, I just, I've been always drawn to Eastern poets and painters, and one, Hokusai is someone I've been spending time with, who was the great woodblock printmaker from the 1800s. And I learned that he lived to be like 90, which is a lot for that time period. And he changed his name almost 30 times in his life, which we would think is like erratic. But he changed his name because he wanted his name to represent who he is now. So it would change depending on where he was. And at the end of his life, the last name that he chose for himself was Old Man Mad About Painting.
It's awesome. It's, in the Jewish tradition, there's a name change ceremony, especially when someone's ill. It's kind of quite common to have, to be called up to the Torah on a particular day, let's say when they're reading the Torah publicly, and then they'll receive a new name. So usually they'll add a name like Joseph, which means more, or Raphael means God heal you, that kind of thing. And there was a time in my 20s when I I could say this, I guess, why not? I was a practicing astrologer, and I was very into Western astrology, and in trying to understand what happens when someone changes their name, in the Kabbalistic tradition, it's like you're being reborn, and there's a new chart for that moment when you have a new name. So this focus, I had 30 different charts, birth charts, right? He was born 30 times. That could be his great last name, which would be man born, reborn, and reborn 30 times, So it's really such a blessing to hear a story like that, and to feel that something that came from your heart, gave people healing and strength.
Well, D.H. Lawrence has a line in one of his poems, "Not I, but the wind that blows through me." So thank you.
So I think that I got to check in with we're done, yeah. So I get the yank, it's like, so I've said this multiple times since I came to the Y. I came here in January of 23. I started my own synagogue here in New York City on the Upper West Side, and it was almost so obvious that programs would just go until they could, until people were like, listen, now we got to close shop. And here we have a much bigger team, and it's a bit more formal. But I hope that this evening, right, was for you all as enriching as it was for me. I would be remiss not to say that the Detours and Destinations podcast is produced by Efrat Bigger with support from Maya Geyer, who is our editor, and from Eden Sidney Foster, and the music is by Shimon Smith. I am the host, Rabbi David Ingber, and until our next Detours and Destinations, may all of your detours be destinations. It's been a great evening here at the 92nd Street Y, the opening of our second season of the podcast, and I can only hope that the whole season is as resonant and as shimmering with wisdom as this evening has been. So to all of you who came, thank you to our AV and to the team at the Brahman Center, and especially to you, Mark. There are books outside as well for your purchase. Don't forget that little piece. And until we have a next conversation, love you.
Love you too.
Okay, everybody.
Love you too.